Chris, a very good morning to you. It seems like the public think this is coming.
Yeah, it definitely seems so. I think there seems to be, well, I mean, whether it's fear or whether it's just trepidation and expectation, there does seem to be some belief that there will be further restrictions this winter. And I think the government have always said this, and as have all the experts. They've always said that the pressures on the NHS are much more severe in the winter. The flu season might even be considerably worse than usual flu seasons, and that coupled with coronavirus could end up with the government leading to lockdowns. And let's be fair, the government have been fairly restriction happy, but I think the public always expected that the vaccine rollout would be a kind of the antidote to that. And regardless, there does seem to be an expectation that we could go back into further restrictions, and the public are understandably concerned about the impact that coronavirus could continue to have this winter.
Of course, Chris, but also a lot of them, and just anecdotally, if they're told to stay at home, they might just say no.
Yeah, of course. I mean, what we've found throughout the pandemic, from March 2020 right really up to now, is that the public do seem very supportive of lockdowns and are supportive of the government doing whatever they need to do. What has been incredibly more difficult, more challenging to measure has been compliance. And I think it's all well and good, the public saying, yes, we support the government, we support the lockdown, the government knows best. But at the end of the day, whether they continue to abide by the rules or abide to the letter of the law of the rules remains to be seen. I do get an impression, even from our polling, particularly in 2021, that there is kind of more of a reluctant acceptance, and that's really been the case. I think ever since Dominic Cummings took his trip up to Barnard Castle, but that's been even more so since Matt Hancock was found to have broken the rules.
Are there any other sort of big key moments that you can define where the public opinion has shifted somewhat?
I think those were the big two. I mean, we had such huge acceptance, huge support for lockdowns, but not just for lockdowns, but for the government in general and for the Prime Minister up until when Dominic Cummings went up to Barnard Castle, and things just completely fell away then. Now the public have been supportive of lockdowns ever since, have been supportive of restrictions, have very much said that the government knows best, and we will continue to be supportive of whatever the government thinks is best. But I think at the same time, there is bound to have been a lack of compliance, or at least the public maybe taking cautious, being more cautious in their everyday life, but perhaps not following the guidance to the letter of the law. I think that then since then, obviously, the government sort of approval didn't dip massively when Matt Hancock was found to have broken the rules, but his personal approval did go downhill. And I think it just served to sort of ingrain further with the public that there is sometimes one rule for the government and one rule for everyone else. But at the same time, they do understand that this is still a deadly virus. This is still a public health concern, and I think that if the government do feel the need to implement further restrictions, and the public will generally be on board with that.
Disapproval of Matt Hancock as much for what it exposed as much as what it said about his approach to COVID. But what caught my eye was that it's interesting. It's young adults who are actually the ones thinking that we've got the worst ahead of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have seen a bit of a shift, generally speaking, in young people attitudes to not just to coronavirus, but a lot of things since the course of the pandemic. And I think there does seem to be a general despondency from young people in a lot of the polling that we're doing at the moment. That things aren't going to get much better, and I think there is just a general malaise, among young people in the UK regarding their outlook, regarding what the government are going to do for them, if anything. I don't think, generally speaking, that the public are expecting that much from government anymore in general. I think that's something of a wider political phenomenon. But the fact that the public, or the fact that younger people are more likely to think that the worst is still to come, that might be more of a reflection of the economic impact potentially of coronavirus rather than necessarily the health impacts of the pandemic. But there is still a sizable proportion of, I think, about 1 in 5 who do think that the worst of the pandemic is not behind us yet. And if that was to come true, and maybe that's the next a further wave or mutations, etc., or maybe even the vaccine potentially not working, there is still a sizable portion of the public that have that very negative view, and obviously from a governmental point of view, they've put a lot of effort, a lot of energy into the vaccine rollout. A lot of media communications have been how it is our way out of lockdown. Yet it still hasn't convinced a fairly sizable, if still a minority proportion of people.